What if I told you that one of the most powerful natural medicines in human history is already sitting in your kitchen, quietly waiting to be used, not in a pharmacy, not in a laboratory, but in the same small bulb people have been eating for thousands of years? Ancient cultures didn't see it as just food. They saw it as protection, strength, even medicine. Egyptian workers ate it while building the pyramids. Greek athletes used it before competition, and healers across the world relied on it long before modern medicine existed. And what makes this even more interesting is that this plant wasn't reserved for the wealthy. It wasn't rare. It was something ordinary people used, which means this wasn't elite knowledge. It was everyday knowledge, passed down through use, not theory. But here's what most people never think about. Some traditions believed when you eat this plant matters just as much as how you eat it, especially at night. And that's exactly what makes this so interesting. Because when your body goes to sleep, it doesn't shut down. It shifts into repair mode. So what happens if you introduce a powerful plant into your system right before that process begins? What might your body actually notice after 7 days? The plant we're talking about is garlic. The same garlic that hangs in kitchens, disappears into soups, and gets crushed into sauces almost every day. And yet, for thousands of years, people looked at this same bulb and saw more than flavor. And once you understand what happens inside a single clove the moment it's broken open, you begin to understand why. If you find yourself curious about simple things like this, the kind of knowledge that feels almost too ordinary to matter, then you're exactly in the right place, because most people ignore these details. But every now and then, someone stops, looks closer, and starts noticing things others miss. If that sounds like you, stay with this channel, because this is where you slowly reconnect with what people used to understand naturally. Before you try this yourself, there's something important to understand. Garlic is not just a vegetable, it's a plant with a built-in chemical defense system. When the clove is intact, nothing special happens. But the moment you crush it, something changes instantly. Enzymes activate, compounds combine, and a new substance is formed. A compound called allicin. This is what gives garlic its strong smell. But more importantly, it's what scientists have been studying for years. Because allicin doesn't just sit in the body, it interacts with microbes, with cells, with signaling pathways involved in inflammation and immune response. Ancient healers didn't know the chemistry. But they knew one thing: crush the garlic before using it, and now we understand why. And that may be one of the most fascinating parts of this whole story. Ancient people did not know the word allicin. They did not have microscopes. They did not study sulfur compounds in laboratories. And yet somehow they kept arriving at the same instruction: break the clove open first. That means they were not guessing. They were watching. They were noticing. They were learning from repetition. And what they discovered through observation is what we are only now beginning to understand in a different way. Garlic, known scientifically as Allium sativum, has been used for over 5,000 years, not occasionally, consistently, across completely different cultures. In fact, one of the most fascinating stories comes from ancient Egypt. When workers were building the pyramids, garlic was not just food. It was considered essential. You can almost picture it: heat, dust, stone, long days of relentless physical labor under the Egyptian sun. In a world like that, people paid close attention to anything that seemed to preserve strength. And garlic earned a place there. Historical records suggest that laborers were given daily portions of garlic to maintain strength and stamina under extreme conditions. But there's an even more interesting detail. At one point, garlic supplies reportedly ran out. And the workers didn't just continue, they protested. Work slowed down. Complaints increased, until garlic was brought back. That moment tells you something important. This was something they relied on. Because in conditions like that, people don't hold on to habits that don't matter. They keep what makes a difference. They keep what helps them endure. And garlic stayed. Which raises a quieter, more interesting question. If people across completely different worlds under completely different conditions, kept returning to the same plant. What were they noticing that made it worth keeping? In ancient Greece, garlic was also taken seriously. Athletes preparing for early Olympic competitions were known to consume garlic before events, not as superstition, but as preparation. The belief was simple: garlic helped the body perform under pressure. And even physicians like Hippocrates documented its use for breathing and digestion. Different place, different culture, and yet, the same plant keeps appearing. And this is where the story shifts, because what ancient people learned through observation, modern science is now trying to understand in a completely different way, not by watching patterns over time, but by looking inside the plant itself. Today, researchers are trying to understand what those observations were based on. But what makes garlic particularly interesting is how these compounds behave once they enter the body. Some sulfur compounds are quickly broken down and released into the bloodstream. Others appear to influence how cells communicate with each other. Researchers have even observed that certain compounds in garlic may help the body respond to oxidative stress, a process linked to aging and cellular damage. This doesn't mean garlic is a cure for anything, but it does explain why scientists continue to study it. Because for such a simple plant, its interaction with the body is surprisingly complex. Some studies suggest garlic may support healthy blood flow. Others explore how it interacts with immune activity. And one of the most interesting areas is how these compounds behave during rest. Because your body does something very specific at night. It repairs, it regulates, it resets. During this time, your body is not distracted by movement, food intake, or external activity. It can focus inward. Cells repair damage, hormones rebalance, and systems that are less active during the day begin to take priority. That's why some researchers believe that what you consume before sleep may interact differently with your body than what you consume during the day. Not better, not worse. Just different. And certain biological processes become more active during sleep, including detox pathways in the liver, which raises a simple but powerful question. What happens when garlic enters your system right before that process? So instead of looking at garlic as just food, you can start looking at it as a small daily experiment, not something dramatic, not something extreme. Just one simple action, repeated over time. Because what makes this interesting is not what happens in a single moment, but what your body may begin to notice after several days of consistency. And that's exactly what we're going to explore. What happens day by day if you introduce garlic into your system before sleep? But before we break it down day by day, there's something most people get wrong. It's not just what you take, it's how you prepare it. Because if you simply swallow a whole garlic clove, almost nothing interesting happens. The real effect begins the moment you break it open. That's why preparation matters more than people think. The simplest method looks like this. You take one fresh clove. You crush it, not slice it too gently, but actually break it open so the inside is exposed. Then you wait about 5 to 10 minutes. This step is often skipped, but it may be the most important part. Because during that short waiting time, the compound allicin begins to fully form. After that, you can take it with water, with a small piece of bread, or mixed with a little honey if the taste is too strong. And timing matters too. Most traditional uses suggest taking it in the evening, not on a completely empty stomach, but not right after a heavy meal either. Somewhere in between. Simple, but very intentional. So this is not really just a 7-day test. It's a small window into how ancient people thought about daily medicine. Day 1. The first thing you notice is intensity. Garlic is strong, sharp, unmistakable. Your digestive system reacts immediately. For some people, that means warmth. For others, mild stimulation. And something else happens here that most people don't expect. You become aware of it. The taste, the smell, the intensity. It's not passive like most foods. It demands attention. And that alone makes the experience different from anything else you eat during the day. It feels ancient somehow, sharp, strong, almost medicinal, not like a snack, more like something your body immediately recognizes as active. Day 2. By the second day, something shifts slightly. The intensity is still there, but it no longer feels unfamiliar. Your body begins recognizing it. And sometimes something subtle appears, not just in digestion, but in how garlic lingers in your breath, even faintly through your skin. Because the compounds don't just pass through, they circulate, which makes the experience feel more present. Day 3. By day 3, repetition starts to matter, not because anything dramatic happens, but because your body has now seen this pattern more than once, and that changes how it responds. This is where ancient practices begin to make more sense. They were never about intensity. They were about what happens when something small keeps returning. Day 4. Around day 4, the experience becomes more noticeable. Not louder, but clearer. You start paying attention in a different way. How you wake up, how your body feels in the morning, how your energy moves through the day. And sometimes this is where sleep begins to feel slightly deeper, not longer, just more settled. Day 5. By day 5, something changes, but not in the way most people expect. It's no longer something you have to think about. You just do it. And that's where this starts to resemble how these plants were traditionally used. Not as an experiment, but as part of a rhythm. Something small that quietly becomes part of your routine. Day 6. By day 6, the question often changes. Not, is this working? But, what am I noticing? Because by now, the effect is not something obvious. It's something subtle. And this is where many people stop. Not because something went wrong, but because nothing dramatic happened. But that's exactly where traditional thinking was different. It was never about dramatic, it was about consistency. Day 7. By day 7, one thing becomes clear. Not a transformation, but a pattern. Your body responds to what you give it over time. And garlic has been part of that pattern for thousands of years. And once you start looking at it that way, the small details begin to matter more than you expect. There are also a few small mistakes that can completely change the experience. For example, taking too much. Many people think more is better, but with garlic, that often leads to irritation instead of benefit. One clove is enough. Another mistake is taking it completely on an empty stomach late at night. For some people, this can feel too strong. A small amount of food alongside it can make a big difference. And finally, consistency matters more than perfection. Missing one day doesn't matter. There's something interesting that many people only realize after trying this. Not everything comes down to what you take, but to the details around it. Timing can change how the experience feels. If you take garlic right before lying down, it becomes part of your body's quietest phase, when everything slows down and shifts inward. But if your stomach is sensitive, taking it a little earlier in the evening may feel more comfortable. Preparation matters too, because garlic doesn't fully become what it is until it's broken open. That moment, when the clove is crushed, is when its most active compounds begin to form. And that also explains why a few simple details can make a real difference. Fresh garlic is usually more potent than pre-cut garlic. Letting it sit after crushing gives those compounds more time to form. And cooking it at very high heat can reduce some of its active properties. These may seem like small details, but small details are often what separate a random habit from an intentional one. So maybe the real question is not whether garlic works. Maybe the real question is what starts to change when you begin paying closer attention to the small things your body responds to. Because for thousands of years, people did not separate food, rhythm, and healing the way we do now. They observed, they repeated, they adjusted. And garlic was one of the things that stayed. Not because it was perfect, but because it kept earning its place. So if you do try this for a few nights, pay attention. Notice what you feel. Notice what changes, even slightly. And if you've ever tried garlic this way before, or decide to test it after this video, share what you noticed below. Not because every body responds the same way, but because sometimes the most interesting patterns begin when people start comparing what they experience. And if this kind of forgotten wisdom speaks to you, stay close. Because this channel is not really about trends, it's about rediscovering the quiet knowledge people used to live by. Subscribe and keep exploring nature's original pharmacy.